All right, well, good evening. This is Evan Stahl coming with you for our Module 3 reflection blog for the week 3. Since we don't have a discussion this week, we get this done a little bit earlier in the week so it gives me time to work on the next item for later to work on this weekend. So without further ado, we'll get into this. This week for our reflection blog, we read the article Standing Up for Ethical Values, so we're going to cover that real quick and finish up with answering 2 prompt questions. So here's our objectives. First, just want to go back over and reflect on some of the reading that we did for this week, and then our 2 prompt questions that we'll answer there. All right, so starting off with reading reflections. So some takeaways I took out of the reading. Just some pretty good points that was made in the article. One size does not fit all. So when it was talking about leadership styles and how they are, different organizations kind of require leaders to kind of be able to be fluid with their leadership styles. What might work for someone who's an entrepreneur might not work with someone like me who's in the military. It's just a different aspect. There's different people to deal with. There's a different objective to meet. And in order to meet those objectives effectively, sometimes leaders have to change up their leadership styles. So the big thing is you can't just plug and play. You kind of got to be fluid. You kind of got to be flexible, and you kind of got to know the different types of leadership styles. So moving on, there's ethical behaviors does not come naturally. So with that being said, it's not something natural. We're not robots. Not everyone is programmed the same way. Some people have to learn ethical behaviors. Some have to learn the hard way through finding out through their actions and the things they do that maybe they weren't the most appropriate things to do at the time. Some people might just grow up in different backgrounds where something they did might be acceptable compared to someone who might not see that acceptable. So they're not something natural. They're something that's learned throughout life. Normally they're set early on growing up, but if say you don't come from a very stable background, maybe your ethical behavior is skewed compared to the normal. So it's not natural. It's just one of those things you got to work on. And then moving on to ethical dilemmas. Subjective decision making. So kind of piggybacking off of ethical behavior, if it's something that's not natural, then it's subjective, right? So what I might see as an appropriate reaction to maybe a situation or dilemma, and how I see fit how to handle that situation, could be interpreted different ways from somebody else who might have handled it differently. So it's subjective. So just having a baseline and a good understanding of right and wrong, and understanding your position as a leader and what is expected as right and wrong in your spot as a leadership is very important and kind of drives those decision makings that you make. It might not be the best decision, but it's the best that you can do in the situation that you're in, with the ethics and morals that align with the organization you're a part of, along with yourself. So it's just one of those things you just got to be of knowledge, understand, and be able to adjust and react to. Taking emotion out of it and then putting objective evaluation. So with that, I know a lot of, like, when it comes to like ethical dilemmas, you got to take your emotions out of it, and you got to understand the entire process and understand exactly what's going on in order to make the best decision at hand. Once again, comes back to that one size doesn't fit all kind of leadership style. The same answer is not a one size fit all for a situation. You got to take yourself and your emotions and what you think might be right or wrong out of it, and go off of what you are expected. Maybe it's driven by policy or something like that. Maybe it's something that you didn't want to see happen, but hey, this policy in our organization has this policy in place for this reason, and you will act as a leader accordingly. So that's a big thing. So that's that objective evaluation, having the bigger picture, having the overall understanding of everything going on, and making that decision off that. And with that, it broke down a little bit more. So you got to understand both sides. You got to understand if you make a decision, if this is what decision you make, this is the outcome. So if you make this decision, this is the outcomes. Kind of consequences, and knowing the pros and cons of your decision making. And then like I said there with the policy, evaluate duties and responsibilities. So as a leader, a lot of us work for companies or organizations, or like myself who work for the military. Everything is driven by a policy, and there's a regulation on everything that we do. And we have to abide by that, and there's a reason those things are in place. And as a leader, you're expected to make decisions and, if need be, disciplinary actions based on those policies for people, or maybe people who violate that. So just having that understanding and that whole picture concept is very important. And I put in there, what would a virtuous person do? Um, so a virtuous person is someone of excellence, highest standard you could think of ethically, and you just got to think of what they would do in that position. Um, and just kind of, once again, on that whole concept of making a decision, just put that in there as a factor to factor in. And then continuing on, so it talks about research-based decision making. However, the article really didn't go into what that is. So I did some additional research and found an Indeed article that kind of touched on what it is, and it's broken down in these 4 points right here. Collect evidence, and when it says collect evidence, just understanding the situation as a whole, understanding everything going on, not leaving anything out, so everything is on the table when you have to make those decisions. Interpreting, so once you had that evidence of collected what's going on, interpret it, understand it, dissect it, really kind of get down to the grass, the root cause, maybe the root cause analysis of what's going on in order to make an appropriate decision. Apply insight. What do you know? What do you know is right? Maybe it's policy that you know an action was taken, and you know this policy is in place, and maybe it violated that policy. So you got to apply all that insight into it, and then finally you take everything of all that and decide, make a decision. It's probably the bread and butter of being a leader. You have to make a decision. And so that's what I kind of researched or found on research-based decision-making process. So some additional research I found too um, was an article on the Harvard by Baseman from 2020. Maximize values, right? So maximize yourself, maximize other people's values, understand their values, and bring them to the table. Overcome boundaries. So when we talked earlier about unconscious biases and biases, things like that, understand that you have those. Understand how they play a role and how you do stuff. Acknowledge that you know or that you have them, and when you make decisions, make sure you're addressing those things. And creating value through trade-offs. So when you have to make decisions and two parties are involved, there's trade-offs, right, between the both parties to make sure everyone has kind of a fair gain or fair outcome to what you have to do. And use time to create value. So as a leader, take the time to create value, not of yourself, but the people that surround you. So just bringing them up to speed on the values that you want and the values of the company, things like that. So just taking that time and creating that culture. And then finally integrating yourself. So as a leader, we're not just thrown in positions off the get-go, especially in the military. You don't start off as a supervisor. You do your time, you learn kind of the ropes, the ins and outs, and through progression and through sticking out and doing the right thing, eventually you will promote on to become a supervisor. And that's when you start to integrate yourself. And once you become that supervisor, now you're in charge of people who were just in or just the shoes that you were in. So now you're in charge of developing them. And so that's when you integrate yourself and things you learn and values and ethical things that you've accustomed to yourself, and just giving back and trying to instill that into people under you that you are bringing up. So that's what I found for additional research. So moving on. So our two prompt question here is, what ethical values are critical and make use? So here's some things I just kind of threw down that are very important to me. Autonomy. Even though you're in a leadership position, people that work under you, let them make decisions, right? Give them the opportunity to make those decisions, and then that's when you step in as a leader and guide it. Make sure it's heading in the direction it needs to go. Be a beneficiary, so promote the well-being and welfare of others. That's a must, and that kind of goes hand in hand with respect, honesty, and integrity. But we'll get to this here in a second. Equality. Treat everyone as equal, right? The golden rule. Treat them how you want to be treated. Everyone is in this together. We're all part of this together. It's a big thing in the military. We all know what we signed up to do. And with that, we can't see colors, you can't see genders, you can't see any of that stuff. We are all in this together. So that day comes when it hits the fan. I don't care who's to the left or right of me. I just want to know that you have my back, and we can do this together. Honesty and integrity, I think those probably are the most generic two morals and ethics across the board. Everyone knows about those two, but they're important for a reason. That's why they're there. Respect, that is a huge thing. I'll kind of get more of that to in the next prompt that we'll answer. Accountability, holding people to a standard. We have we have regulations, we have things in place for a reason. If not, things will erode, and then we have chaos. So that's why we have standards to meet, and we hold people accountable to make sure they meet those standards. And then the last one, that adaptive leadership style, compassion, empathy, is very important. That's huge. It's probably one of my most things that I make sure are integrated with my troop, stuff like that. So being compassionate, empathetic, and being a human being, what it boils down to. And final last thing here, what are some situations personally, professionally, where you had to draw the line in the sand and take a stand against something because it violates your ethical principles? So by trade, I'm law enforcement. Respect is a huge thing in law enforcement. There's been several times where I've had been to deal with people and stuff like that, and respect is just a huge thing. It goes both ways. And it is a very important thing. And I think it's what drives a lot of us. And I think it's a lot of us what we all want, is we want respect for one another. So it's very huge. It's something I always continue to this day, and I try to instill in my subordinates and just people in general. So with that, here are my references I use, and this is my briefing for the week. So on to the next one.